Now, the next characteristic worth considering is whether or not that pistol has what we call a takedown lever. These are levers that make it easy to disassemble and field strip that handgun. Now, there's only a few characteristics left. And I must say, we're kind of getting to those that are less and less relevant. We're going from most important to least. So starting with this one, we really don't have to consider this too much. That said, whether or not your handgun has a takedown lever may be a very relevant factor for you. You see, field stripping our guns and cleaning them regularly, and for a combat grade tier 1 handgun that is carried in relatively clean conditions, I recommend at least once every 3 months, but ideally we would do this every single month. It's important to ensure reliable function should you need to depend on that gun on any random day. Misfires happen and jams happen, and carrying a handgun concealed exposes them to more dust and lint and sweat and body hair than you can even imagine. There's plenty enough obstructions out there within your local environment, between your clothing and your handgun, that could cause a misfire if you don't clean them regularly. Now, every pistol out there can be disassembled and cleaned, and there's a minimal amount of disassembly to get to the main components to blow dust out that we call field stripping. And so every gun can be field stripped, every single one of them. However, the difference is how easy or how difficult it is to actually perform that field stripping. For example, on some guns it can be very difficult, such as the 1911. To disassemble or field strip one of these weapons requires some specific knowledge and some practice, and you can easily get turned around to the point where you lose your ability to get it back together, and you might need to actually have a gunsmith help you out. Now, if you know anything about the 1911 platform, you're not going to have a hard time with that, but if you're new to it and you bought it for other reasons and you didn't make sure you could field strip that gun in the gun store, then that would be a pretty big mistake. And on the spectrum of how easy or how difficult it can be to field strip a gun, you'll find many stopping points. For example, personally, I don't have a problem with field stripping the Glock pistol any longer. It's not difficult for me to pop the slide off and pop the recoil spring out and pop the barrel out and then perform a quick cleaning. However, I've seen some very skilled people who are not used to the Glock platform get hung up on that. And it's just simply because they don't have the specific training. And so what we need to do as firearms users is to make sure that we have the ability, the knowledge, yes, but also the ability to field strip our handguns. Ask the person in the gun store to show us how to do it, and make sure that you have the physical dexterity and strength required to do so. If you can't field strip a handgun, I wouldn't buy it. That's how important keeping a gun clear of obstructions is. If it jams on you in a self-defense situation because you weren't able to clean it for 6 months or 12 months, then that's not acceptable. That gun didn't do you any good. And so there are more modern weapons out there that make field stripping easier, such as the Springfield XD with its takedown lever. And you can find in your manual how that's done, and you can ask gun store users how that's done. But the point is, you need to make sure that you can field strip your gun. If it gets to the point where you physically can't field strip a semi-automatic handgun, then that's a situation where I would consider going with a J-frame revolver. You just have to be able to guarantee that gun's gonna fire when you pull the trigger, or else it's useless to you. Now, we're going to talk more about field stripping and maintenance for both semi-automatic pistols and revolvers in the next part of the program. But again, make sure before you leave the gun store that you can field strip your pistol.